You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome. Kevin Laramee joins me. I'm Duane, Rollins Soccer Today. It's today, month of the Olympics, Kevin. A month of the Olympics.
A month of the Olympics and a year to the day that I would like to forget.
When the Women's World Cup ended 1 year from today. We're going to talk about that in our third block today, the 1 year anniversary of the end of the Women's World Cup, which Kevin would like to forget. A lot of our listeners probably remember quite fondly, as we have a lot of American listeners, and we hope you all had a great 4th of July. You didn't eat too many hot dogs, didn't get burnt by any fireworks, all that stuff. We survived Friday, so hopefully you survived Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Hope you weren't involved in a food fight, and hope your 4th of July was one to remember for good reasons.
All right. Couple quick points. First off, we talked it was a month to today to the Olympics start. So hopefully you will listen to our Five Rings coverage, which is really going to amp up in the next month or so. Soccer Today I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for the 2 weeks of the Olympics, but we will have a daily Olympic shows there. We will have a lot of Olympic soccer coverage, which we will probably banner under Soccer Today or Two Solitudes at that point. So stuff to be worked out there, but hopefully you'll be listening to that when it rolls around. Also, I want to give a little nod to the Canadian basketball team who got a big win over Turkey this morning, so they're getting a little closer to maybe being in Rio as well.
Surprisingly, but they beat Turkey. So Steve Nash, coach of the Team Canada in basketball, and Kerry Joseph of the world champions or NBA champions Cleveland Cavaliers. Good on you for this morning.
All right, let's move past that. I do want to give a quick nod, and I shouldn't say I don't normally do this because I talk about League One Ontario all the time, but I don't normally talk about specific results in League One. But I was at a game yesterday involving a club called Toronto Skills. Toronto Skills is a very young club. It's their first year in League One Ontario.
Do they wear their name correctly? Is the name suiting of the team? Are they skillful?
They certainly endeavor to be skillful, yes. Toronto Skills, they do things the right way in terms of trying to create a tip of the pyramid that young players within their club aspire to. They have a lot of engagement at the club and to try and get their players out to watch these kids, to aspire to be them, to have heroes that are playing locally that they can say, one day I want to be them. That's exactly what the vision of League One Ontario is. Not every club has quite the same setup. Not every club has quite the same engagement. They've also remained true to sort of their philosophy of giving academy players from their own system a real opportunity to test themselves against higher opposition. And it's been a challenge for them in their first season this year because they're young, and it is a big step up for them, and they had not won until last night. So I did want to congratulate them, Toronto Skills, on getting the first win because they have the right idea, they have the right spirit, and they have the right effort going forward on what we should be doing across the system in Canada. So I wanted to give them a little tip of the hat. Congratulations to Toronto Skills on their first League One Ontario win last night. And I was privileged enough to be there and to talk to some of the people immediately after. And I wanted to start the show with something positive like that, Kevin.
No, exactly, because we're going to touch about, like always, as always, like less positive stuff. If you just look on the Twitter feeds as we speak, Gianni Infantino, and it's starting already with the head of FIFA. Now there's allegation and there's internal reports that he's overspending on futilities. And it's just, it started already.
Yeah, well, Infantino's, we might as well talk about that for a little bit right now. Might as well go from one end to the other.
Yeah.
Look, I said that at the time. I mean, I did a lot of conversations about that last summer when this stuff was going down and during the election. And I did think that among the choices that were there, that he probably represented the best opportunity to begin a process of moving away from the old ways, but he is attached to the old ways. So it doesn't surprise me that he's getting swept in part of these. And I maintain maybe a naive hope that he does have enough separation and enough integrity to sort of pull this organization ever so slowly away from the bad old ways of the past. But it's going to be a slow process, Kevin, and it was never going to happen overnight. You can't flip a switch and instantly make FIFA different, right?
Like, you can't go from caviar to craft dinner in a day. It takes an adaptation period, no?
No, exactly. And look, sometimes you have to be pragmatic about reform. And I've said this, and I use the analogy up here, and the American analogies would be the same, that, there are ways that things have been done for years, and to change how it's been done at the grassroots from the top is going to require a consistent effort over a long period of time. And sometimes you have to take baby steps, which might mean that you need to plug your nose sometimes in terms of who you're supporting at the top. And I'm not saying anything specific when I say that, but you might have to plug your nose at points in this process. But as long as the pressure stays on them to make changes and no one relaxes and stops sort of looking at them hard, then changes will come, because these guys want power more than anything else, and they will do whatever is needed to get the power. And sometimes that might mean making reform, because they still want the perks. It's not like we're going to take perks away completely from the president of FIFA, right? That's still a pretty high position that people are going to aspire to, and people are going to want that, and they're going to do whatever the prevailing winds are to get that position. So that's kind of my point, if that makes sense. It's a cynical point, but nonetheless, it's kind of how I view FIFA and the IOC and other big organizations like that.
Well, exactly. You kind of, I put things in perspective. If you go to political scandals over the year, and there's like corruption allegation here in Quebec, the way they're trying to get rid of it, it's not to put everybody behind bars at once. You have to change the culture. You have to slowly, at the grassroots level, start to change people. And for change to happen, sometimes you have to give amnesty to certain people. You have to make deals with the devil to, put things slowly on the right track. But you have to make amends as the party, at the authority figure that's trying to change ways. You have to put water in your wine to know that, look, it's not going to be easy, and we do have to go to their level sometimes to bring them back up, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, look, it's we all want things to change instantly, but it's just not the case, Kevin. Let's move past that, though. We will obviously pay a lot of attention to FIFA issues as this show continues through its days. It's something that I've talked a lot about in the past year or so, both on my own shows and on other shows that I've been privileged enough to be asked onto. Let's move to the Euro, though. We're not going to have a long Euro conversation today, because we've talked a lot about the tournament. There is today's off, and they start back up tomorrow. So obviously we'll give more attention in the rest of the week. But I did want to sort of talk in general about the tournament today for about 10 minutes or so, and speak to our question of the day, which simply is, who's going to win? Because Twitter only offers 4 choices on their polls. So
and guess what? There's 4 teams left.
Yeah, so I was able to ask that today, and that was really, when I'm half groggy, when I'm thinking of the question of the day, that's sometimes easy as good.
Yeah, good. Win, who? Yes.
Quite obviously the 4 teams in the semifinal. I asked who people thought were going to win that. The results are pretty much as you would think, with 78% of people choosing either Germany or France, and 44% of people, almost a majority, picking Germany, which, in fairness, are the favorite from this point. Yes, although the French obviously are in there with a chance at home. The other 2 underdogs, it's interesting to me that Wales is above Portugal right now, 13-9, and I don't know whether that's hoping or thinking.
It is exactly. I was going to say, is it emotional or is it logical? What type of choices is there? Because
look, Portugal just keeps ticking along. Wales is the Cinderella still left in this, and I think most people, if I asked tomorrow, who are you cheering for to win, I think Wales might win that poll. Amongst, I don't know, Kevin, you might pick France. I think you would pick France, yes, but other people might, and other Quebecers might pick French as well. But nonetheless, I think a lot of people are going to pick Wales, because they're never been there before. And everyone kind of likes a team that's never been there before, because it's different, and different is fun, and all that sort of jazz. But certainly interesting going in. But look, the questions, I have 2 questions I wrote down today. Has this been the worst Euro in your memory? And it isn't mine. It has not been an entertaining tournament in a lot of ways. It does not draw me in the same way others. I mean, I've watched every game partly because I have to, and that kind of says something. In the past, I've wanted to watch every game, and this has just been kind of a haul at times because there have been a lot of really bad games in this tournament. And that could be the 24 teams. It could just be the state of tactics right now. I'm not sure what. It could just be a state in the fact that I'm older now and I watch so much soccer so many days of the year that to watch this many in a condensed period is almost becoming work at times. That could just be me. So I don't know, Kevin, what are your thoughts? Or is this been the worst Euro tournament you've seen?
Depends how you quantify worst. Is it because of the amount of goals scored? Maybe. They just scored over 100 goals in the last game played. So I don't know if it's a worst ever that way. I know it's a tactics right now. It's a very defensive type of games, but like I mentioned, team that have caught our attention, team that did make new fan base are a couple of teams that did go after games, a couple of teams that were offensively set, like a Wales, like a France, and there's still a chance that those teams will prevail. So who knows? Maybe it's the transition period. Maybe we're seeing the different type of tactics face on the pitch, and we're gonna know who gets it right. And there's many ways to win games. Sometimes with the pressure, with the tournament becoming bigger, more money involved, more, it's hard to say reward for the winning team, but more importance to the trophy and the accomplishment that you do when you win that tournament. So those things combined, players and coaches don't want to risk it all to look bad as well. Sometimes it's just a question of optics. You want to look good and you set yourself up tactically to your advantage, to your strength. And if it's to put 11 people behind the ball and give slide-in tackles every single second because that's the only way you can do it, well, you kind of have to, because the tournament is so big and there's so much pressure on everybody involved that nobody wants to be the GOAT. Nobody wants to be the scapegoat, and nobody puts themselves in a situation that they can be. Just ask Boateng.
Yeah. There's been games in this tournament that have stood out, and there's been narratives in this tournament that have been quite fun. Obviously, the Iceland situation we talked a lot about yesterday, and everyone enjoyed that. You can only have a first time once, so it will never quite be the same for the world watching Iceland, or for Iceland being at a major tournament if they were to qualify again, because they've been there and they've done it for the first time. And we all got to see it for the first time, and we'll enjoy watching it moving forward. But like I say, there could only be a first time. France, as the host team, have sort of plugged along and done what they've needed to do. I think the Welsh, obviously, in a different kind of way and kind of hidden because of Iceland's story and the omnipresence of Iceland's story, haven't got quite the amount of attention that maybe they should as a team that's stood up and got it done out of the blue. England's implosion in the round of 16 is something that a lot of people have talked about and focused on. So that's a negative storyline that's getting talked about, as well as the seeding that people continue to focus on. So there's so many kind of stories that are going around this tournament. But in terms of the football itself, there's been better tournaments. There have been more entertaining tournaments anyway. There have been, that said, there's been good tactical games. And I'm very much looking forward to sitting down and focusing entirely on 90 minutes for 3 more times in this tournament, because obviously when you get to this stage, it's must-watch TV, and you want to head out and watch these games and enjoy them. I'll be watching the game on Sunday with some friends. It's his birthday. One of my friends, he's a Spain fan, so he won't be quite as excited as he would have been otherwise. But nonetheless, he's a Canada fan and a Spain fan, I should say. But
yes. Duane, the other theory out there that it's been talked about is, you mentioned the state of tactics. Let's talk about the state of football players. It's just the type of players that we have today. There's no Ronaldinho. There's no Zidane. There's no players that are out there with the intention to just not win games, but to put on the show, to be able to try things, creativity speaking, to go beyond what's expected. Now it's not that. We're talking about people that are defined in roles, and you need to do this, need to do that, and it's fine at that level. You need to do so to achieve results, but there's not that moment of brilliance. So those Ronaldinho, Zidane type of moment that we have seen in the past, just because those players, well, they kind of don't exist anymore.
Yeah, the tactics have caught up to him. I mean, I'm just old enough to remember Maradona, the very tail end. I remember fat Maradona, but nonetheless, even him at that point,
everybody wants to forget fat Maradona, though.
Yeah, But even him at that point in his time could still do stuff out there and was still an entertaining person. Now, Zlatan is the closest you have to that in the modern game, I think. And Ronaldo, but he's not that player. He's a talented player. He's a player that creates a lot of narrative around him. Messi, same way, but they're not that sort of freestyling kind of player that you're talking about, and that kind of is a loss. Quickly before we take the break, I did also have who you think the best performer so far in the tournament has been, and to me, it's Gareth Bale. He is my MVP of this tournament so far, my Golden Boot of this tournament so far. Who would it be for you?
It's a toss-up. I do have Griezmann with his performances that have been amazing, especially the last one, but the one before too. So Griezmann, Payet, if you go on the French side. On the German side, there's not one player that stands out. So even though I would like to say Gomez or a that's about it, maybe the only player that stands out, I think they have been outshined by other players. Ronaldo didn't do quite enough yet to be considered that best overall standout player. Gareth Bale, Antoine Griezmann, Dimitri Payet, but I would go between the Grizz and the Bale.
All right, fair enough. And I think that award will be determined in the next 3 games, because obviously these next games matter more than the rest, all to put together. Okay, Kevin, let's take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to review last night's MLS action and Mr. DeYoung.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back. In the third segment, when we review the Women's World Cup, we sort of reminisce about that. Kevin, maybe we'll open the lines up there so that people, if they want to talk to us about their memories of last year's Women's World Cup, they can do so if they wish to. So we'll do that in 15 minutes time. Keep that in mind. What's the number, Kevin?
778-400-7761.
All right. So if you want to talk about your memories of last year's World Cup, do so in 15 minutes. But let's focus on Major League Soccer till now. Look, let's start. We're going to talk about DeYoung. We're going to talk about tackle number 2. But first we'll talk about the results. Kevin, big win for the Galaxy over Vancouver last night. The Whitecaps continue to struggle to defend and continue to struggle to score. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's not necessarily an easy game for the Whitecaps, who they had a very emotional last week with the result of the Voyageurs Cup, with the travel. Now they're going to LA. They lost 2-0. The return of Robbie Keane with a great goal by Robbie Keane. Yes, there was that tackle, and LA finished at 10, but they were able to hold on to the result that they have created. For Whitecaps, it's still questioning. Are they waiting for reinforcement? Are we going to have players signed in the next few days? We are expecting more movement on the Vancouver Whitecaps side, so that will be interesting, because now Rivera is not playing, and you have basically a player missing until that deal is finalized. So it's kind of the limbo time for the Whitecaps until they settled and finalize their roster.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked someone last night, to me, the issue with the Whitecaps is that they forgot how to defend somehow in the last year. And I'm not too sure what's going on there, because this was one of the teams that was the best defenders in the league last year, prior to last year. So I just don't know what's happening there. Kevin, let's move on to Colorado, though, as well. Orlando lost 4-0 to Dallas. I don't know what more to say about that, but the Colorado game is the one that a lot of people are going to be talking about, because it was Howard's debut. He did get the clean sheet, and we were laughing off air that the hashtag narrative is already going on, because there's a glowing headline on MLS soccer.com about how Howard was massive in his debut for the Colorado Rapids. And I clicked this morning. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't see that game. I was working the League One game. I watched the LA Vancouver game later. I said, okay, well, I'll watch the highlights and I'll see what happened. And well, it turns out that Howard only made 2 saves.
And it's a 0-0 game. It's not even a win. So, yeah. So, no, exactly.
How massive was he? There's some confirmation bias at play here, and there's some hashtag narrative at play.
Hashtag Team McMath. McMath would have done the same.
Yeah, well, probably, yeah. Math might have been able to stop the two. I mean, the story on MLS Soccer sort of focused on how he marshaled the back line and all that sort of stuff, which is legitimate to focus on with a keeper. But I'm not sure whether having a guy come in on one day or 1 week's training or whatever for his first ever game is necessarily going to have a massive change in how the back line is marshaled when they've been working with another keeper all year prior. In fact, it probably was a bit of a downgrade for that. They're getting used to each other. They just are a solid defensive unit. And I think that that's more of the story here is how Colorado continues to find ways to grind out results and to stay near the top and to be so solid defensively. They were so solid defensively last year before any of this stuff was going on. And they continued that and found just enough scoring this year, although not last night, obviously, to get it done. We asked earlier on Two Solitudes earlier this year, we had our guest on to ask whether they were for real. And we sort of determined at that point that probably was the answer. Is it any more definitive at this time in your mind, Kevin?
Well, I don't think Howard will be the defining factor of that question. It's not, are they for real if Howard is there or not? I think they're for real without Howard. So the fact that he's there, I don't think changes that question. He's not, for me, the important piece. We've had that discussion over the years, how there's a goalkeeper, because we hypothesize of, would a DP goalkeeper bring enough value on the field for a team to justify in a salary cap league to spend that amount of money of the cap in one position that, at the end of the day, is it enough to get you wins? So, or enough wins to justify that salary? And that's always a question. And I still don't see the value there. And nobody have done the experiment. So the experiment is being done right now by Colorado. So at the end of the season, we'll see, compared to McMath's first half, we'll see if Tim Howard's second half is comparable to the first half. And the way McMath left it, the job for, he basically walked off and said, follow this. So now you have to basically get more than 2-point average just for people to say that you were equal to the one before you.
Yeah. Look, here's the thing about Colorado's start to the season, 33 points. They did actually fall into second place in the Western Conference with the draw yesterday, and Dallas's win. Dallas at 34 points now to 33, although Colorado still does remain the best points per game team in the league at 1.94, which is an absurdly high points per game ratio that will probably drop a little bit because Major League Soccer is funny that way. They only really need 17 points out of their final 17 games. So they only need 1 point per game to probably make a playoff spot. 50 points is generally the line. I suspect that they're pretty safe there, and that does allow them some flexibility in terms of finding the right way to play this season out and to find a little bit enough more offense. And I do wonder about, and I've said this before a lot and done the breakdown before, that the top defensive teams do not succeed as well as the top offensive teams do within Major League Soccer. That's a stat that's out there. That old adage that defense wins championships is a load of crap when it comes to Major League Soccer. Scoring wins championships in Major League Soccer. Whoever can score the goal ball. You have to defend well enough. Like the TFC experiment of 2015 isn't going to work. You can't be the worst defensive team and the best offensive team. That's not going to work for you. But if you're the best offensive team and a mediocre defensive team, you can win a title. So Colorado's got some time to figure that out, and they still have only scored 19 goals for in their 17 games. So that still is an issue that they do need to work out. And I would wonder whether McMath might provide some trade value for them now that he has shown in the first half of the season that he can be successful. But then again, look, who needs a keeper?
No, but not just that, Duane. They already got rid of their third keeper.
Yeah.
So they went by keeping McMath and to keep Howard, in my opinion, because they got rid of the lower in the depth chart to make space for him.
Yeah,
so that's how
they don't want to be TFC 2, who I think is now clearly illustrating the folly of not having a legitimate backup keeper. I mean, Bono, he didn't allow a lot of goals. He's only allowed the one goal in the last game, but there were a couple of shaky moments there, and his distribution's pretty god awful. So
I just hope he never plays on a Sunday.
Yeah,
he'll be bloody
Sunday. It's also Bono. I keep saying Bono though. Anyway, we need to get to a Bono.
We need to get a YouTube clip going. We need to get a bumper for Alex.
Look, and I hate bashing him. I really do, because he's young and he's a developing player. He's young for a keeper. He's not young for a player, but it seems mean, but he's not ready. And TFC deserves a lot of criticism for putting themselves in that position. At any rate, we do have to talk about the other talking point, which is going to be the talking point of the week, I guarantee you. And hyperbole will be the name of the day.
Nigel, breaking ankles, De Jong.
Yeah. Look, it was a bad tackle, and it deserves a red card, and it deserves a suspension. Does it deserve a lifetime ban and to hang the man? Probably not.
Oh, no.
That's, you sign Nigel De Jong knowing that he's an aggressive player that likes to tackle. And there's a lot of people out there that like to talk about, they lament the fact that there's no tackling in the game anymore. But here comes along a player that does actually tackle. And when you tackle a lot, you miss sometimes, right?
We all talked about Laurent last year and how he got a couple of reds. But when he got his tackles right, look what it did. Gave him Defender of the Year because of his great sliding tackles that we have seen all season long last year.
And that's the thing about De Jong, is that those that only watch the red cards and only see those 5 or 6 horror moments in his career tend to get caught up in this narrative that he's nothing but a goon, where if you watch him game in, game out at the Major League Soccer level, he's perhaps the best defensive midfielder in the league. So there's that.
And if you have ever played soccer and went for a challenge and you see the guy changing direction on you in the last second, you're already sliding, yeah, it happens. And, it's not always recklessness. It is sometimes you're off time and you're going for a tackle that you shouldn't go for, but it's not always 100% intentional as well. Things happen, and the guy changed direction with the ball, trying to get away from you, trying to evade the defender in the tackle. And if the tackle's already launched, and if it's a sliding one, yeah, it could get ugly, and it's not always on design.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to defend yesterday's tackle. It was a clear straight red, and he deserves a couple games for it. But let's face it, we've all wanted to do that to Blas Perez at one point. But no, that's an aside. At any rate, I will defend the overall idea of having De Jong in the league, though, because, again, if you can't have it both ways, you can't lament the loss of tackling in this game and at the same time get angry when a guy tackles, because this is what's happening here. And it's not that De Jong is the first MLS player to ever be hyper aggressive and occasionally catch players and be considered a little dirty. There's been lots of them before him. I think that he gets, if his name was Nick Young rather than Nigel De Jong and he was from Sacramento, I'm wondering whether he would have the same sort of hyperbole around him. That's an honest question that I ask myself, and I ask you, the listener, that if he was an American that sometimes caught players late, you'd probably defend him a little bit more. I'm not saying you'd defend him outright, just as I'm not defending him outright, but I think you might not call for his head as much, and that's sort of where I go with that. There is an interesting side to this as well, pragmatic, that we can talk about as well. There is a trigger in his contract which will make him a DP next year if he plays a certain amount of games. And right now, because of the amount of games he's missed both through injury and through suspension, he can only miss 5 games the rest of the way. So the length of this suspension will be very important to Nigel De Jong.
So does Bruce call Disco and say, "Yo, Disco, do you suspend him for 5 games? That would really help my cap space for next year."
Yeah. Well, the thing is, yeah, if they want to bring Zlatan in, exactly. The question is whether Gerard and Keane might leave, and then you'll have the 2 DP spaces, and the point will be moot. But if one of those two decides to stay, and I think Keane's the more likely there.
Yeah, he's going to play to his 75. So.
Yeah, then you're going to have to make a decision if you want to bring Zlatan in, or the league, changes the rules, which is also possible.
Which we've seen that happen before.
What do you think the suspension will be? I think it'll be 3.
3? Well, yeah, we didn't talk off air. We didn't prepare this.
Yeah.
With great minds do think alike. But 3 games seems to be what, if you're looking at precedents that the MLS Disciplinary Committee have given, it's about 3 games. Maybe because he's a repeat offender this year, maybe they will go to 4, or I don't see 5 because of the reason we talked about. MLS doesn't necessarily want to be the one deciding if a player will be a DP next year, and if they do suspend him, you know what? Actually, no, it shouldn't have any bearing on the suspension. If it's worth a 5 game, maybe because of the repeat offender thing. I don't know, but 3 games seems to be more logical to me.
Yeah, well, there's some. Most sports will have something more for repeat offender, but And again, if he punched a man, if he headbutts a man, if he does something that overt, then yeah, you throw the book at them. But a tackle that's missed, that's mistimed, that is dangerous, that's reckless or whatever, to me is a lower level of a problem. And as I get frustrated by the hyperbole around this, because again, he's not like he's punching people. He's missing tackles. And I think part of that has to do with just his aggression level and the fact that he's maybe not quite as quick as he was when he was 25, 26. So he misses them a bit more often. And, if you want that kind of aggression, if you want that kind of physical play in the league to a point, you're going to have to accept that the point's going to get crossed sometimes. And this is just what DeJong brings. And he is a useful player to LA. No denying that. All right, let's take a break, Kevin. We'll come back and we're going to reminisce on 1 year later, the Women's World Cup.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Give us a call. Studio line 778-400-SPN1. That's 778-400-SPN1. Give us a call right now. Lines are open.
Been a year, Kevin.
It's been a year. What? It's been a year that we've stopped talking about this.
Let's talk about
Turf.
Let's talk about
Turf.
Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that make me. Let's talk about
Turf.
Let's talk about
Turf. Talk about turf.
Talk about turf, baby. Haven't heard that in a while. Blast from the past there. There was a time when that was a bumper. If you're new to us, that was a bumper that we created in the lead up to the Women's World Cup last year, because we talked about turf so much that we thought it needed its own bumper.
Like every show for like 6 months.
Yeah, I could tell you a lot about field turf and grass and technologies around playing surfaces. I have an absurd amount of weird knowledge on that at this particular point in my life that I don't know what use it will ever have pragmatically, but man, can I tell you, if there's a PhD available on AstroTurf, field turf / whatever versus grass out there, I mean, I think I probably might qualify for at least a master's in that. I'm up for it. Anyone want to give me an advanced degree?
At least an honorary doctorate for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not going to have that conversation today, but if you want to listen to our archives, there's a lot of great conversation that does get into detail and technical detail about the differences and the laws. It wasn't a lawsuit, the legal action that the women put against the turf or the Women's World Cup last year, and so on and so forth. Seems like a long time ago now. We'll get back to that, but let's move to the actual tournament itself. And of course, the Americans, after what was a shaky group stage, and I think we forget all that, how bad the Americans looked in the lead up to the tournament and in the group stage. But then once they hit that knockout rounds, it became pretty clear pretty quick that there was one team to beat in this tournament, and it was unlikely that anyone was going to beat them. And certainly a year ago, in the afternoon, so in about almost exactly a year to the hour, they were standing in the confetti, Kevin.
They were in Vancouver, BC Place. They deserve to win, of course. It was a great moment. But what I remember for the Women's World Cup, it was people talking about, the stands weren't full. But if you looking at it as a whole, it was the biggest Women's World Cup ever. It was the most attended one ever because, the other ones were quite small. So it was a movement forward for the game itself. And that's what I take back from a year ago. I'm going to go on a small rant, though. The only thing I truly feel it's a shame, is there anything left from the World Cup for the national team? Anything left? Anything gained from the World Cup? And I still cannot answer my question about this.
Yeah, in terms of the legacy of it, to speak to your point there, the two tournaments that were held in the United States did have probably higher average attendances, but they didn't have the amount of total attendance because there were more teams and more games in this World Cup, and that's a significant factor. There were some empty seats early on, and there were some reduced prices for tickets and things like that happened throughout this tournament. But there is the only people that were making those kind of complaints were based in the country where the average attendance is bigger, and you can't have the tournament every year, guys. Canada did as well as pretty much any other country save one in the world would have with this World Cup. So let's move past that. In terms of your question of legacy of the Canadian women's program, I don't know either, because it didn't really increase the facilities. There's a few upgrades of training surfaces and things like that were out there. I work, as I said at the top of the show, I work for Ligue 1 Ontario here in Toronto area and in Canada. And I see firsthand how bad some of the playing surfaces, how truly bad some playing surfaces can be, and having some upgrades to world-class field turf, world-class playing surfaces mattered, right, to the communities that they're playing in. So I'm not going to dismiss the fact that it wasn't grass, that they were upgrading these things too, because it's important to have all-purpose, training facilities.
All weather, literally all weather.
That can last in this country. And there's some really crappy surfaces that we have to play on here that aren't playable in some cases. I was at a game last week that I had to cancel because it wasn't playable. So having upgrades there mattered. So that's a legacy, I think, that did help a little bit. But in terms of the actual, performance of the team, there's no league here anymore. There's no more increased playing opportunities for women at any level. Ligue 1 Ontario women did start. That's something, a minor thing. However, on the same hand, we lost the two Quebec teams, which were strong programs in the past. So
and they were literally landmarks of the women game in this province. We're talking about the Laval Comets and the Beauport. So there were teams that were literally been here for like 20 years almost.
Yeah, and so it's kind of treading water in that regards, and that's. Remains, and I said that at the time too, that it remains the biggest factor. People in this country like to talk about how the men's program sucks, the women's program covers everything, and it's a very black and white sort of simplistic way to put things. To me, I always come back at them. If you want to objectively take a step back and look at it, the women's program is in more trouble than the men's program because there are less playing opportunities for young players once they get past a certain age. I don't celebrate that in any way. I don't quite know why some people on the women's side of things celebrate the fact that they're better than the men's program in terms of performance. I don't get that. It's just beyond me. But in terms of development, in terms of opportunity, there's a lot of problems on the women's side of the game, and a World Cup didn't necessarily fix that. And I think there's lessons there too, if you want to just briefly speak to the men's side of the game and the CSA's sort of directive and strategy right now to try and land the 2026 Men's World Cup as a great cure-all for the game in this country. There's a lot of lessons there. There's more money that would come into from a men's tournament.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying that one way or the other. There just is. So that might make a bit of a difference. But a year later, are we really better off because we hosted a Women's World Cup? Other than maybe it might set us up to get that men's tournament.
Yeah, if you're looking at the American side of things, because the same question can be asked, but the answer is quite different. Looking at 2015, the Women's World Cup for the U.S. Women's National Team, a star was born. Carly Lloyd announced herself on the biggest level, and it created a new figurehead for the U.S. Women's National Team, a new superstar, a new captain, a new one of the greatest players in this team right now. And that was created on the level, on the stage. I mean, to the scale of the Women's World Cup last year, and it has carried over, and she is now the face of this team with Alex Morgan, and those two announced themselves at this tournament, and was the passing of the torch. And at least for the American side of things, they have more legacy. Not that they just won the thing, it's because they actually anointed new players, gave new opportunities, and players took it, and now they have new faces to represent their team in the future and to continue on the greatest level. Those two players will be continuing forward as the face of that team, and it was all created at the Women's World Cup last year.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the U.S. women reestablished themselves as the clear number one in the world. There were some questions leading into that tournament, questions that we highlighted a great deal in the lead up to it on our shows. However, they proved us all wrong. They shut us all up during the month of the tournament, and absolutely were deserved winners of that, and are absolutely deserved favorites to win gold again in Rio in now a month's time. So all of those things played into that, and that is the legacy of from the American side. Is it was a continuation of the excellence that had defined that program for a generation now, and it just continues on. I've said it before. I'll say it again one more time here. The U.S. women should win every major world tournament. They have so many more advantages than the rest of the world right now. And as long as they continue to push forward and to aspire to be even greater and greater, they'll continue to win these tournaments. And it's up to the rest of the world to catch up. In terms of on the pitch, you mentioned about Canadian legacies. To go back to Canada, because we were the host. In some ways, the tournament might have held back the rebuilding process that needed to happen, because they couldn't afford, and I agree with their decision here, but they couldn't really afford to put the kind of lineup that they're sending to Rio on the pitch last summer with the pressures that would have been inherent to hosting a home World Cup. So I think that they kind of treaded water, and that it might have been, if it was any other place that the World Cup was, they might have sent this year's roster there last year, And they might be a year ahead of things right now in terms of the rebuilding towards the 1920 cycle, because even in the lead up, in fairness to us, we were saying that then. A lot of people up here were, buying into the false narrative that they were a contender in that tournament, whereas realistically they needed to sort of refresh that lineup a long time ago, and they're finally doing so now. So that said, making a quarterfinals, having sold out barns to watch them play throughout the tournament, there is a legacy there in terms of fandom, in terms of inspiration that won't be definable, won't be understandable for another 10 years or so. The 8-year-old girl that saw her heroes play in person, that then took up the game and maybe is going to excel in 6, 7, 8 years from now, we're not going to know for a while. So we can't really define that, and I'm not going to fault them for trying to put the best possible lineup in place for the World Cup, rather than sort of trying to balance winning and future, right?
And I think, just to go back on the pitch again, like you just mentioned, Canada's legacy is definitely Kadisha Buchanan from the Women's World Cup last year. The only really big bright spots for Canada, defender of the tournament. She was, and she now is, the face, the heart, the soul of this team for futures to come, Kadisha Buchanan. So maybe Canada did have a legacy. Maybe it's on her. Maybe it's her.
Yeah, and look, and it gave Christine Sinclair, to talk about the one face that does exist, it gave her an opportunity to have sort of to be celebrated in a true way. I mean, she won the Player of the Year the Canadian Athlete of the Year overall, all sports, following London, and that was a big, remarkable accomplishment for a soccer player to ever do it. But to have that month where it was all about her, and to make her a household name, and to make her a true sporting hero and sporting icon in this country, which prior to 2012 wasn't there, even though it deserved to be there, I think was a valuable thing as well, because we don't celebrate our best in the way that we should, as much as we should. Let's talk about turf one last time right now, and whether or not playing a Women's World Cup start to finish on turf, on artificial playing surfaces, had an influence on the tournament, and whether it changed how people see turf. There still is, like we just saw Copa being played on fake grass put over top of turf in the United States. So there's hardly been an absolute acceptance of the playing surface. But to me, and maybe I am biased on this, but to me, there was a softening. There weren't any major injuries that came out of it. Yeah. There weren't.
Well, it'll take more years for that to, because people are not going to say now that, no, you were right, turf wasn't that bad. It's going to take a couple of years for people to admit that, People are having trouble saying that they were wrong in life. And this is one of the cases where we'll see that happen. But no, there was no major injury, Duane. The play itself wasn't necessarily diminished because of the playing surface. Players adapted and playing a quite entertaining type of soccer last year on those pitches. So, no, I think you're right. I think in hindsight, in 4 or 5 years down the road, that tournament would have maybe justified the choice of turf.
And as I said at the time, one of the big reasons why I don't I do see some of the issues. Like, there is a difference in how the ball bounces and things like that. But I mean, we're tennis fans, both of us as well, right? There's a difference in how the ball reacts on grass versus clay, and we don't complain about that. It's just a difference in how you're playing. And I think that we will get to a point where turf fields are more widely accepted. And I think more importantly, turf fields will open the game up to more parts of the world to host tournaments. And that's the big reason why I was adamant that it was wrong-headed to try and fight this on a discrimination level, because to me, the acceptance of turf moving forward is something that will open the game up to more women, more girls, more boys, more players in more parts of the world at a higher level. And there are terrible grass pitches right now that are being played on that could never host a major tournament. But if you were to go in and put 6, 7, 8 field turfs at a world-class level into some of these countries that currently aren't capable of hosting tournaments, then maybe they might be able to moving forward. And I think that that's an overall benefit to it. And look, the one other thing that has happened here in Canada anyway, directly on turf, is that the men are now playing on turf regularly. They played all 3 of their qualifying games at BC Place. That doesn't seem to be changing around anymore. So the calls that it was unfair that the men wouldn't be forced to play on turf just proved to be unfounded when it comes to the Canadian men's national team. They're playing on turf now. They're playing regularly on turf now. So I think that that's a good thing too. And yes, I agree that it should never be a case that the women get one surface that is deemed less superior. I just argue whether it's a less superior surface, and that was the juxta what I was arguing all along. I don't think it's a worse surface. It's just a different surface.
Exactly. No, it's just different. Doesn't mean that it's better or worse.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with a bits and bytes segment and an NASL segment.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back. It's the autumn season in the NASL. I was reading an article the other day when they said the fall season, and then in brackets they wrote autumn because the
That's
English,
awesome.
the autumn, they use autumn rather than fall.
Oh, I'd rather use the autumn for the post-season.
Autumn season. All right. The autumn season. The fall season started in the NASL on the weekend. We didn't have time yesterday to really go through the games real quickly. A lot of draws in the first week, which I guess stands to reason as teams are refinding their feet after a break. This is too short of a break to call it 2 seasons, and we belabor that, so I'm not going to get into it today, but whatever.
Why don't you just call it a break? Just say, take a break. You're allowed to see other people. You're allowed to mingle with other people during that time. But we all know we're going to get back together soon, so just call it a break.
We're just taking a little break. All right. There was only 2 wins on the weekend. The Cosmos beat the Fury 2-1, and Minnesota United slapped Carolina down 5-1. Carolina had started the spring season out as the hottest team. They were in first place after 4 games undefeated, have been just utter crap since. So I don't know what's happening there, but certainly that's a problem. If you want to get more NASL coverage, regular coverage, obviously the NASL Nightcap will provide you with detailed stuff week in, week out on the network, but we certainly do try and touch on it here as well.
Exactly. So NASL Nightcap will be back probably tomorrow or next week.
All right. The other games, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, they drew 1-1. Puerto Rico and Indy 11 drew 1-1. And Tampa Bay and Jacksonville and Florida Derby drew 1-1. And Rayo 1-1 with FC Edmonton. So Edmonton continues not to lose, but they kind of would have maybe wanted a win to start their fall season there. And we'll make sure we'll talk to one of our regulars soon on Two Solitudes to get a bit of a roundup of the Canadian teams. But I wanted to talk a bit more about Puerto Rico because they are back at this level for the first time in, what's it been?
4
4
years.
years?
3-4 years for sure. Something like that.
3-4 years. Yeah, the Puerto Rico Islanders were one of the more successful D2 teams for a long time. They made the Champions League a few times coming out of the Caribbean qualifying. They're similar to the Canadian teams in that they have a separate way to get in. So because they were playing probably the highest level that of most of the Caribbean clubs out there, were able to grab one of those spots for several Champions Leagues, beat TFC. That was in 2009. The Islanders beat TFC in a playoff to get into the group stages of the Champions League. That was maybe one of the low water marks for TFC. Yeah. But
when you mentioned the Islanders of Puerto Rico, for me, you mentioned the NASL back when Montreal was in the NASL. I remember it was always a fun time to have that team come to play, because when they came in town, they had a different team composition. They had more Caribbean flair to them just because of composition and of roster and player available. So it was always different and fun to see the Islanders play, and everybody fell in love with everybody. I know it's an hyperbole, but people fell in love with the Puerto Rican Islanders because of that aspect. They were a different team than everybody else in the NSL back then. They really had a different flair, different look with the colors, and really were different in the way they played the game. And it was interesting to have them in the ESL back then, and quite happy to see them back for this fall season.
Yeah, no, to be clear, this isn't the Islanders. That they had money problems ultimately at the
Puerto
end
Rico
and
FC.
had to fold. So go ahead, Kevin.
I said it's Puerto Rico FC, owned by Carmelo Anthony of the New York Knicks.
Sorry, I don't mean to make fun of it.
No, but they were owned. No, but maybe
who
eventually.
Owns the team?
Exactly.
The slap shot.
Who owns the team? Who owns the? Nah, hang up.
Anyway,
just hang up. I'm gonna mute myself now.
Anyway, yes, they have more money behind them now. It's too bad they don't have the Islanders name there, because it was a young team still, but there was almost a little tradition. As I said, they went deep in the Champions League a few times. They had good fan support too. It's not that Puerto Rico is a baseball culture, right? Like that's the biggest sport there, and they played in a baseball
diamond. And wrestling, yes.
Yeah. So that said, they found a nice little crowd base and fan base that did go out and support that team, and as I said, had quite a bit of success in the short run that they did have. There are challenges inherent with playing in Puerto Rico. There's challenges having them in your league, as we've talked to Stephen Sandor about before as well, in terms of travel and things like that. I would wonder whether Puerto Rico might be better suited for a Caribbean league if one were to ever start. Yeah. And I don't know what their aspirations are there, but certainly it is nice to have them back.
The fact that they're the biggest team in the Caribbean almost now as well, and they have that going for them, and it's at least I'm happy to see them in the ESL back. Hopefully they'll be the shining star of the Caribbean like they have been in the past, and it will be fun to see them. Different look, but the orange is back, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, and I think that having the orange strips again is a bit of a nod that we're not the Islanders because we can't be, but we are the Islanders is sort of where that comes from. And,
we're the spiritual continuation of what the Islanders were, just under a different name and maybe more money. So, yeah, because if you look at the cost just for travel itself, Puerto Rico as a team travels more and than any other team in any other pro sports in the world. So it's like the team in the world that travels the most is Puerto Rico FC.
Yeah. And, I don't know in terms of on the pitch what they'll be like this year. It's going to be a challenge to come in at the halfway point. There's only one way that they can really make the playoffs is to win the fall season. I mean, I suppose they could finish second and with one loss or something and maybe make the playoffs top four, but not having the points from the spring season is going to put them in a huge hole to get top four, right? So basically they have to win the fall season. So this is almost an exhibition season for them right now, just to get their feet, to see how they can go forward. They're not quite coming in like the Cosmos did a couple years ago when they were able to win that fall season.
Yeah, they're not coming in guns blazing with like Raul and all that. No, they're coming in slowly. It's like a soft launch, and it's a way to set up things for probably next year in a more competitive way for the 2017 spring season than fall season.
Exactly. And it's always going to be a bit of a challenge to get players down there, but they did they had not just Islanders, like when I say Islanders, I mean people from the island, not just players from Puerto Rico down there in the past. They did manage to attract how do you put this, non-Puerto Ricans to go play for them. And that's going to be important if they're going to be successful long term. But I think the other important level for this team is what they can do to sort of raise the overall level of play for that nation, which does have an opportunity to qualify for a World Cup potentially down the line, or at the very least for a Gold Cup. So lots of good stuff there, and I'm happy to see them. And I reached out last week to try and get someone from them. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that, but I would still enjoy having a conversation with someone that deals with them. So I'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to follow Puerto Rico pretty closely in the second half. They're one of the more interesting teams in the NASL for me, at least, Kevin.
No, yeah, exactly. But again, welcome back, Puerto Rico FC, and welcome sight of the orange kit in the NASL.
All right, a couple bits and bytes to finish the show off. We talked about Maxime Tissot last week, and him unfortunately no longer being with the Impact. There are suggestions that there are quote unquote 5 contract offers for him out there. So it's good to see him land on his feet. 2 of them are, as we anticipated, Ottawa and Edmonton. So the 2 Canadian NASL teams seem to be fighting for him. There was one in Europe, maybe Scandinavia, they're suggesting. I'm wondering whether it might be a Finnish league or something, one of the lower level Scandinavian teams out there. Because if you're looking at an NASL, that's kind of a similar level. You've seen Tissot week in, week out for a while, Kevin. Do you think he'd be successful in the NASL?
I think it would thrive in the NASL. I think it would be one of the best players for his team in as a left back or even as a left midfielder. He has a lot of offensive upside, and I do feel that he's reliable defensively as well. He has been exposed a couple times in MLS, but it wasn't necessarily because of his own fault. When you don't necessarily practice, and when you practice out of position and they put you back in your original spot, or vice versa, it's not always easy to shine in MLS. For Maxime Tissot, I actually do still believe he can be at the right level in MLS. I do feel he has the qualities and the class and the skills to be in Major League Soccer. We've seen him score goals that were goals of the week in Major League Soccer. I do feel he has the talent to be in this league. Maybe one of those 5 contract offers is Major League Soccer. I do hope he gets a shot somewhere else in MLS where he doesn't necessarily have that homegrown tag as well, because that is always a bit of pressure when you're here. If you looking at Cal Ouimet, yes, it wasn't necessarily easy, and Ouimet now is loaned in the NSL, but for a player like Maxime Tissot, if he gets a fair shot and like a new beginning, I do feel that I saw him this season when he played with a little chip on his shoulder, when he felt like he had to prove something. He did amazing, and the Impact did not necessarily let him go because they quit on him. It's a mix of playing time, they have seen in the future of getting a younger player a shot. It's that mentality. You do have to think about your academy and to give him a shot. And if after a couple of years you're not necessarily having plans for him for next season, you kind of have to pull the trigger. And when Maxime Tissot plays with a chip on his shoulder, he's a little bit more aggressive. And he scored goals, and he did what he did with Montreal Impact earlier this season. So I do hope that he finds a spot in Major League Soccer, because I do feel he belongs.
He has the advantage of having that left foot, right? So
exactly,
that's a skill that is in demand in Major League Soccer. So I do believe playing a fall season for either Ottawa or Edmonton, to me, makes the most sense for him, because his most likely landing spot will be with either Toronto or Vancouver back in Major League Soccer, because that is something that I can tell you right now that Toronto could probably use another left foot out there. That would be interesting to bring in a Montreal Academy kid to TFC. That hasn't happened before, but certainly, as the academies continue to put out players and they don't have the roster spots to use them, I think we're going to see more of them bounce from one Canadian team to another Canadian team, because until they change the rules in terms of Canadians as domestics in the United States, that's their best fit, right?
And I still have that feeling. Don't rule out Kansas City.
Well, yeah, if they can, sure, for sure. They do need to find the international spots in that particular case. So I think there does need to be a bit of a change, and we have to look carefully at what teams have in terms of their international spots at this point in the season. But again, he has a skill that is useful, and if he plays the season and excels in the NASL, then I don't think there's any reason why he can't get back and be front of mind if he's playing close to home. So Ottawa might make some sense. Yeah. Edmonton's close to Vancouver as well, obviously, relatively close.
And quickly, Duane, as well, Montreal is apparently close to signing a Italian Serie B, a little bit of Serie A type of journeyman striker, Matteo Mancosu. I doubt that it would be very doubtful that it would be a DP contract, probably like a close to a regular normal type of salary for MLS. He was on loan. He was owned by Bologna when Bologna was in Serie B a year and a half ago. He has played for many different teams in Serie B. He has scored some bunch of goals in Serie B. I don't know how that correlates to Major League Soccer. In Serie A, played for 21 games in Serie A total, a couple of goals there, a few, but wasn't the same output offensively. Interesting to see if that materializes. Apparently, he's on his way with his agent across the pond. So we'll see what Matteo Mancosu does for Montreal. Maybe that's what they're missing. Different type of striker. It does answer a need of maybe the post Drogba, but he is a 30, not even, he's going to be 32 later in December. So he's 31 years old for now. In a journeyman type of striker from Serie B, Duane.
Yeah, look, Montreal, I think, despite struggles recently, still probably considers themselves a contender to win something this year, especially with the East being what it is right now and kind of bunched up like an accordion. If any team gets hot in the second half, they're going to win the East run your way, and Montreal has to think they're into that. And I would think that bringing a 32-year-old from Serie B, which we don't know. We haven't had enough signings from there to have a great understanding of how they fit into Major League Soccer, but certainly the championship level strikers have done well in MLS if you want to compare an English second division to this. So I would think that the skill-wise, he would be right up there. It's whether or not the fit's quite the same.
I think one skill that it's not talked about enough is trying to make chicken salad out of chicken, you know what? And when you're playing in Serie B, you don't necessarily have the same service, the same type of passing and chemistry and service from your midfielders. There's a bit of gap. It's not that big, but there's a bit of gap of skills there. So you have to make more out of what you have. And when you score a bunch of goals in that league, maybe that correlates very well with Major League Soccer when that second, third effort can be rewarded in this league. So maybe that aspect of his game could be what the Montreal Impact are after.
Exactly. We'll watch that carefully. That one certainly does seem like it's going to happen based on the rumors that are out there. Kevin, on that note, that's the ends of our bits and bites, which was really just a bit and a bite today. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock as always. And until that time, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
And as always, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.